Hello, you're watching the news from Kazakhstan. I'm Askar Shayaliyev, and these are the top stories. Does K+ threaten the national security of Kazakhstan? Senators propose to introduce censorship of foreign media. The passing of the humanization bill could see the release of almost 20% of all Kazakh inmates. No such luck for political prisoners. Parents in southern Kazakhstan complain about teachers using violence against school children. On Friday, several Kazakh senators made a surprising statement, openly and directly saying they do not like the information policy of the TV channel K+. The lawmakers now ask the Communication and Information Minister to come up with mechanisms to influence foreign media, which practically means the introduction of censorship for dozens of foreign venues available to Kazakh citizens. It was revealed an appropriate bill is already being developed by the government. Observers called the intention of senators absurd. In market economy, viewers cannot be told what to watch, and the threats to the national security should be sought somewhere else.
Foreign media threaten the national security of Kazakhstan, said on Friday Senator Teligen Muhamedjanov. Apparently, the lawmaker dislikes the way TV channels broadcasting abroad show Kazakhstan in a negative light. K+ was cited as an example. While staying in a hotel abroad, you can watch K+. It is not clear who founded this channel, but it broadcasts very different negative coverage of all processes happening in our country. The senator asked the Minister of Information Askar Zhumagaliyev take urgent measures against such channels, saying information security is a strategic matter for Kazakhstan. In response, the minister said the government is already working on a bill regulating the activity of foreign media. The urgency of this combination suggests that the senator prepared it beforehand. With the unproductive chairmanship in the OSCE nearing its end, rants like this show that after a long and active suppression of Kazakh independent press, the authorities are planning to increase the information vacuum in the country. At the moment, the ministry is developing a bill on TV and radio broadcasting, which will include the norms regulating the activity of local and foreign media. The bill will specify the rules for the way they should follow the law. Right now, we have no rules or appropriate regimes for foreign media. Observers believe the senators should talk to regular people more often, while media advocates say the desire of Kazakh authorities to regulate the work of foreign media is absurd. Quite simply, there are no such mechanisms in the world. Bans will only promote the media showing an alternative view, while it is impossible to force Kazakh citizens to watch only local TV channels. Obviously, it is censorship. People will still watch, listen and read media like this through the internet. The information minister noted with regret that the number of foreign TV channels broadcasting within the country far outweighs the local, while rural villages have access only to satellite TV. Zhumagaliyev seriously believes that next year Kazakhstan will fill the information space with domestic products and expand the overseas market by extending the broadcasting schedule of already existing and new TV channels and internet projects. At the same time, senators and the minister never paused to ask themselves what is the real reason for the rural population to prefer foreign channels as the source of information.
Irada Gusinova, the analyst of the Extreme Journalism Center who commented on the situation, believes initiatives like that likely come from the top authorities.
I believe this issue would have come out sooner or later anyway, because too much information is already accessible, which can't be liked by the authorities. There is likely a direct order to control the media, and now they will come up with ways to license and regulate the broadcasting of the foreign electronic mass media.
One of the people mentioned in US cables released by the WikiLeaks is the US ambassador to Kazakhstan, Richard Holland. During a meeting with the Kazakh graduates of American universities, the diplomat said the scandal is actually more criminal than political, and the release of secret communication greatly spoiled the relations between the US and several countries.
More WikiLeaks reports when in fact they're totally manufactured by those other intelligence services, and they're not true.
Richard Hoagland is mentioned in some of the secret cables exposing the Kazakh political elite. For instance, President Nursultan Nazarbayev's son-in-law Timur Kulybаев, who serves as the deputy board chair of the Fond Samryk Kazana, is accused of corruption. WikiLeaks quotes a dialogue between Hoagland and the former vice president of Kazmunaygas Maksat Edenov.
On Friday, activists of the unregistered party Alga submitted an application to Astana's administration requesting a permission to picket the regional office of the ruling party Nuratan. Similar requests will be made in other parts of the country as well. The mass pickets aim to support the recent appeal to Kazakh Prosecutor General Kairat Mami, signed by over 150 public activists and regular citizens of the country. They called the prosecution office to launch an investigation against President Nazarbayev's son-in-law Timur Kulibayev, who is suspected in laundering $600 million on Swiss accounts.
It deals with the sale of stakes in oil deposits. We are talking about some major money in our future. That is why we are concerned about it and want the population to know about every development. Activists said that the Anti-Corruption Committee of the ruling party Nuratan must fulfill its immediate obligations and prove in action that the authorities really fight with corruption despite the high status of Kulibayev. The cue should be taken from the Swiss Prosecutor General, who carries out an investigation over the action of Kazakh citizens against Timur Kulibayev. The protests are scheduled for December 20th.
The oppositional Social Democratic Party Azat is once again denied re-registration. On Friday, Astana hosted already the fourth hearing on the suit of the political organization against the Justice Ministry's Registration Service Committee.
The judge found punctuation errors in the charters of the United Parties, as well as discrepancies in Russian and Kazakh descriptions of the organization's new logo. With that, the hearing was postponed yet again until December 20th. The heads of the National Social Democratic Party Azat, Jarmahan Tuyakbay and Bulat Abilov, are trying to register their union under the single name for already a year. However, the process is always interrupted by the Justice Ministry. They don't want our party to become stronger, fearing it can become bigger and more active. They want to somehow prevent us from participating in the elections.
To the other news, about 20 mortgage holders in Shymkent gathered on Friday near the city's BTA mortgage office, asking the company's management not to sell their only housing at banks' auctions. Lawyers say the eviction of people is the direct violation of the law. After the talks involving the city officials, the company agreed to a temporary compromise.
All affected mortgage holders from Shymkent have similar petitions asking the director of BTA Mortgage South Kazakhstan branch to leave them their only housing and extend repayment terms. Svetkulka Derkhazhaeva took the loan of $23,000 and then paid back some of that in 3.5 years. Later she learned that she only covered the interest. I paid the bank $307 every month. When I had work, I had to pay on the 18th, but I always did it early on the 2nd. But I can no longer pay after the bankruptcy. I'm not refusing to pay, but before asking something from people, they should be given decent work first. The appeals to the bank were brought by about 20 people. Their housing is confiscated through the court for debts. Lawyers, however, say that with these actions, the bank is violating the law. The director of the BTA mortgage said himself they no longer have a license. There was a round table in Almaty on December 1st, and the Financial Supervision Agency confirmed they are working illegally. All they can do is accept payments or file suits to recover money, but they have no authority to evict people. A dozen police officers monitored the action. The district prosecutor even decided to take part in the behind-the-closed-doors talks with the branch director. 20 minutes later, the head of the South Kazakhstan branch silently accepted all petitions of the mortgage holders. I have already said all I had to say. The branch decided to satisfy the petitions of the mortgage holders and recall its lawsuits. Additionally, the settlement terms will be extended by half a year with lowered monthly payments. People call this term salvation, as now they have a chance to save their only housing. The lawyers of the movement Protect People's Housing do not celebrate the victory just yet. They still have to fight for apartments of mortgagors who already received their eviction notifications.
Every fifth inmate in Kazakhstan will be eligible for an early release if the parliament will eventually pass the bill on the humanization of the criminal legislation. The news was reported on Friday by the Deputy Prosecutor General Johan Merkel. Unfortunately, the potential 20% of released inmates doesn't include any of the country's political prisoners.
It seems that the freedom will be postponed indefinitely. On Friday, Kazakhstan has returned the bill to humanize the criminal law back to the lower chamber. The Deputy Prosecutor General Johan Merkel said, if adopted, the amendments will allow for the review of verdicts issued in accordance with the articles falling under the decriminalization. Merkel noted that at the moment 52,000 people serve their sentences in Kazakh prisons. 82 of them were convicted for great crimes, with the rest of 18% could be eligible for release. The official didn't specify the exact numbers for the potential release in case the criminal code will be decriminalized after all. In total, there are about 1,500 people convicted for articles accepted for the decriminalization, liberalization and other exception of imprisonment sentences. Just recently, the Prosecutor General Kairat Mami announced the full list of articles suggested for the decriminalization. The list does not include articles used to convict civil rights advocate Evgeny Zhovtis, journalist Takniyak Kuchukov and Ramazan Yesergepov, as well as public activists Yermek Narymbayev and Aidos Sadikov. The lawyer of the Kazakh Human Rights Bureau, Leyla Ramazanova, says these articles were not included in the bill from the start. The authorities never had enough will to lower sentences, change verdicts or transfer these cases into the administrative jurisdiction. Leyla Ramazanova believes that the articles used to convict the political prisoners were not included in the bill specifically because of the prisoners themselves. That is why all 5 can now only hope for an early parole, says the lawyer. At the same time, even a single violation of detention regulations can spoil these plans, and the experience of Evgeny Zhovtis shows that inmates can be easily framed for such violations.
Dunya Miyatovich, the OSCE representative on freedom of the media, also asked the release of Ramazan Yesergepov, also considered a political prisoner by civil rights advocates. However, the government and the president's administration chose to ignore these calls. Instead, the authorities indulged in constant praising of Kazakhstan's success as the OSCE chair, although not for the work in accordance with the organization's values, but for the completion of the summit in Astana. Senator Gani Kasimov even proposed to award land plots to all Kazakh ambassadors who contributed to the organization of the event. The summit results were also summed up on Friday in Almaty Strategic Research Institute. The flattering remarks seemed to overshadow the most obvious issue of the forum, failing to meet expectations of most participants.
On Friday, the results of the OSCE summit in Astana were summed up in the Institute of Strategic Research. The ceremony was held seemingly to celebrate the triumph, despite the obvious failures of Astana's mediation policies, which were actually presented as achievements. I do not perceive the fact that our action plan was not approved due to existing contradictions between states and different blocs as a tragedy. The tragedy of a failure was avoided at the last moment. It took 12 hours beyond the conference schedule to persuade the participants to sign the final document. In the end, the parties signed the Astana Declaration instead of an action plan, simply reaffirming commitments to the OSCE principles. In other words, the biggest accomplishment of Astana is actually the absence of obvious losses. As a practicing diplomat, I think that this was a big success, because there was the threat that all of us will be left with empty hands. Expert Alexander Knyazyev was not invited to the conference, for he does not share the political optimism. Knyazyev believes the issue is not so much the failure of Kazakhstan's peacekeeping ambitions, but rather the fact the foreign participants of the summit never saw much significance in the event, unlike local diplomats. Nazarbayev and Medvedev's proposals to create new security architecture and OSCE institutions were not even heard by many participants of the event. The real meaning of specific concepts like security, the spirit of Astana from Vancouver to Vladivostok and some others was observed by their pretentiousness. It is obvious that the summit failed to reboot the OSCE, just as it is obvious that no one will ever raise this issue officially.
You're watching the news from Kazakhstan. A new record of 1,259 Kazakh students graduating this year abroad as part of the president's program Bolashak face unemployment back home. The sad truth was revealed at the Friday's alumni forum Bolashak 2010.
Elite graduates of the state program Bolashak cannot find jobs with domestic companies. Officials at the employment forum in Astana admit that the labor market is oversaturated with specialists. National companies do not seek people without proper experience, while graduates rarely want to work as ordinary clerks. It turns out that having a good foreign education, they do not meet the basic criteria of the job market. More than 50 participants of the prestigious program even chose to stay abroad, mainly because they are not in demand back at home. The graduate of a top foreign school, Emnar Kapasov, searched for a job for 6 months. He no longer has any illusions since the state never granted him the promised help with employment. On paper, everything looks nice, but reality is different. I know a lot of people who graduated from prestigious colleges and are still unemployed, not receiving offers from anyone. Recent mass layoffs in civil sector add to the problem. In the meantime, President Nursultan Nazarbayev periodically calls the national companies and state agencies to employ the elite Balashak graduates. In response, the project administrators and officials propose the scholarship winners to get involved in science. Our science really needs new geniuses like Lomonosovs and Satpayevs. Naturally, this requires a completely different and new level of motivation and opportunity. The education minister proposed to also employ elite graduates in rural areas where the lack of specialists is really evident. This year, Balashak program will graduate a record number of 1,200 people.
The success of domestic education was also discussed at another forum in Astana, with Vice Minister Serik Irsaliyev reporting that Kazakhstan has joined the top 4 countries in the world in the Index of the Education Development. Interestingly, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has recently published the results of its own global rating of school education, with Shanghai pupils leading the way by a wide margin.
Kazakh pupils are ranked 57th out of 65 in the rating of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. However, the authorities ignore this statistic and often declare that the country has all the necessary conditions for receiving a quality education. According to UNESCO, Kazakhstan was ranked first in 2009 in the Index of Education Development among 129 countries. The state program 100 schools, 100 hospitals could facilitate the improvement of school education. The project, however, is practically failed. In eastern Kazakhstan alone, 10 schools are not functioning due to delays with finances and other issues. Among them is the infamous school in Semey. The governor tried to launch it already 3 times and now promises to finally do for real it in late February. We will solve the problem. At the moment, it is important to find financing sources. At the same time, education officials say the financing of the sector has increased by a quarter in the last few years. NGOs, however, believe the allocated money is mismanaged. For instance, children require more than new schools building, but also professional teachers. Pedagogical universities are forced to work with anyone who applies there, namely graduates with the lowest grades. In the end, it becomes a vicious circle of poor teachers and poor pupils. While the authorities revel in the supposed success of programs implemented with the education system, school children of the East Kazakhstan region study in hazardous buildings. The situation is not better in the south, where village houses are used as schools, lacking even basics like desk and access to drinking water.
It is not only desks or drinking water that are missing in education institutions in southern Kazakhstan, but also professionalism of educators. Parents of pupils attending Abay school in the Tulbasar district were shocked to find out their children were frequently locked up in cages, humiliated and even beaten by several teachers, while the administration simply ignored the horrifying education methods.
Kanat Birtayev, a teacher of basic military training in a South Kazakhstan village, was caught beating pupils and locking them up in the school armory for bad behavior. This practice continued for at least 2 years before some of the kids finally revealed the truth to their parents. He beats children in his own office. I was never locked up in the cage, but I know 3 other boys who spent 3 hours there. Parents say their children are being beaten and humiliated by the form master and the teachers of basic military training for 2 years, although educators refute all accusations. My husband is being slandered. Ask the school administration about my work. Interestingly, the school administration took a middle stance, not justifying teachers and at the same time letting them choose their own teaching methods. Parents say they wrote numerous letters to the headmistress, who firmly refuses to talk about the problem. I will not say anything. We will deal with this problem without you. However, after saying that the situation is receiving wide publicity, Talesova has finally called a teachers' council, where it was decided to fire the military training teacher and suspend his wife from extracurricular activities.
On a much lighter note, national company Kazmunaygas has come up with a new kind of contract sport and is now ready to pit Kazakhstan's and Chinese boxers working for the holding at its oil deposits.
Kazmunaygas management plans to organize matches between Kazakh boxers and fighters representing countries holding oil contracts with Kazakhstan. This includes the United States, Mexico, Russia and Turkey. In total, there will be 12 Kazakh boxing teams. The winner will be determined in May of the next year and will receive $1 million of prize money from the national company. Since oil became a strategic commodity, we need to closely cooperate with other countries. There are no states we are not working with. The schedule was pre-approved and everything is just a symbolic coincidence.
These were all the main news for now. Join us next week for more. Thank you for watching. Have a nice weekend. Goodbye.